this is a probable cause affidavit, and they don't have to lay out their whole case here. They just have to make up probable cause.
They went through a very lengthy analysis of the cell phone. What people have to understand is the cell phone is not like GPS.
That the scientist and the science behind this, when they do match his DNA with the DNA that was found at the crime scene, I think that will be an extremely important 51%.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello, Reporter Room investigators. Come on in, come on in. I am here with you today. We have so much new information to unpack. I was literally still working on information right up until the live stream. Today, we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger told law enforcement when he was first arrested. We're going to talk about the zip ties. Who really did this to Bryan Kohberger's parents? The Reddit survey. What did Bryan Kohberger want to find out? Proof of more connections to the victims. We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's call to his father. What were they really talking about? And the WSU colleague that Bryan Kohberger tended and befriended, will she take the stand? We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's Google history. What does this tell him about his innocence or guilt? And what really happened to Ethan and Sana, Kaylee and Maddie? We now are pretty sure we know the order. And we're going to talk about Pappa Rogers. And we're also going to talk about that buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator sit down and take a rest? My name is Jessica Della Davies, and I'm an investigative journalist. And my job is to investigate crimes, potential suspects, and crime scenes, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, please do. It's free, and it helps me out a lot. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's go ahead and dig into this. I want to do a special shout out to our subscribers, our mods, and our channel members, and just remind everybody that Bryan Kohberger is innocent until proven guilty, but we are not in a court of law. I am not a judge. You are not a judge. We are not jury members. So we have to talk about this case in terms of him, because he is the one who has been indicted and who is going to be standing trial. The jury selection begins July 30th. And don't forget, we have a hearing in just 3 days. Bryan Kohberger has a hearing. So let's come on in and let's tell me where you are from. Where do you hail from? What city, what state, what country, what continent, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger really told law enforcement when he was arrested, the zip ties, who really did this and why, the Reddit survey, what was Bryan Kohberger really trying to find out, proof of more connections to the victims. We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's calls to his father, Michael Kohberger. What were they actually talking about? And the WSU colleague that BK tended and befriended, is she going to take the stand this summer? Bryan Kohberger's Google history. What does this tell us about Bryan Kohberger's innocence? What does this tell us about his guilt? And then we're going to talk about what really happened to Xana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee. We have a lot more information on that. And we're going to talk about Pappa Rogers and how that account fits into all of this. And also the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break? I am not on camera today because I was literally editing right up until I went live. So according to Dateline NBC, we learned that Bryan Kohberger's late, and I'm going to share with you a lot more information than just Dateline. So if you already watched it, don't worry. We're going to go into a lot more than just that. But according to Dateline, BK's late night drives in the area of the 1122 King Road home began following a Moscow, Idaho pool party that Bryan Kohberger had been invited to. In the first 2 weeks of October of 2022, records show that BK allegedly visited the house near that cell phone tower 3 more times. So that phone was pinging near the 1122 King Road home. Now, Gary Ricardo, he's a forensic psychologist, said that while it's impossible to know what was in BK's mind driving around in the area, but he felt like it could indicate that BK was building up his nerve while making those late night drives. I think, in my opinion, he was hunting. So let's talk about the Reddit survey, and then we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger actually told law enforcement when he was arrested, the zip ties, why were his parents zip tied, proof of connections to the victims, Bryan Kohberger's calls to his father, Michael Kohberger. What was this really all about? The WSU colleague BK tended and befriended. We know who she is now. Is she going to take the stand? Bryan Kohberger's Google history. What does this tell us about his innocence? What does this tell us about his potential guilt? And what really happened to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie? And then we're going to talk about Pappa Rogers and that buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break in the middle of the crime spree? So let's start with the Reddit survey next. So BK set out this Reddit survey, and we know that Reddit was one of the companies that a warrant was sent to. And he was asking during this Reddit survey about their methods. Now, Steve Goncalves told Ashleigh Banfield that his family received a letter from someone who claimed they were interviewed by Bryan Kohberger. And you might know, maybe you don't know, he told Ashleigh Banfield that he got the sense that Bryan was getting off on telling his story, on listening to this story. And basically what the story was that he had listened to a police scanner and waited for somebody to call in some type of DV type of thing. And then the male would be arrested. And then this would be a good opportunity for this perpetrator that BK was on the phone with, that he reached out to after this guy responded to BK's Reddit survey, that the guy would then go in and rob the house. And Steve Goncalves said that Bryan really seemed to enjoy this story. He said that the individual told him that, quote, he, and this is Bryan Kohberger that we're talking about, felt like he was starting to enjoy certain aspects of his story where he could talk about the drunk females being passed out. And if you think about what we learned on the Dateline NBC show, we know that this was something that he really got off to, that he really was looking up corn with a P, and that some of the searches that went along with that were passed out, drunk, so it was non-consensual. So it sounds like, and Bryan Kohberger repeatedly called this guy that responded to his Reddit survey back and wanted to hear more details about his story. So it sounds like he was really enjoying the aspects of when this perpetrator who responded to BK's Reddit survey would talk about drunk females being passed out. Now, let's talk about Pappa Roger. And then we're going to talk about BK's potential connections to the victims, the zip ties, who really zip tied BK's parents, his calls to his father, Michael Kohberger. What were they talking about? The WSU colleague BK tended and befriended. Will she take the stand? BK's Google history. Does this help him or hurt him? What really happened to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie? Pappa Rogers, we're going to talk about right now. And then we're going to talk about the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break in the middle of the crimes? So please stay with me. So Pappa Rogers, we know that he was in a really good Facebook group, and I am still in this Facebook group, the Idaho student. I'm going to not use the M word, but crimes, and I'm still in there. I took a little break from it, but I went back in because it is a good Facebook. But he was in there with us posting. Somebody was posting this Pappa Rogers, and then on Reddit, somebody was posting on Inside Looking, and this person or persons were interacting with us. Now, this is really common for SKs. They like to taunt and feel superior to other people. And as I've shared with you, sociopathic people do have narcissistic traits. Now, not all narcissists are sociopathic, but most sociopathic people do have narcissistic traits. So they like to feel grandiosity and superiority over other people. So is this why Pappa Rogers enjoyed showing off all of the information that he knew about the crime, and why the inside looking also seemed to enjoy showing off all the inside information that he had about the crime? And is this related to the Meta warrants? Meta is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, and we also know there was a Reddit warrant served. So were they also trying to get the inside looking? So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger's connections to the victims, and then we're going to talk about what BK told law enforcement when he was arrested. We're going to talk about his parents. They were zip tied. So who did this? BK's father calls to his father, Michael Kohberger. What were they talking about? The WSU colleague that BK tended and befriended, is she going to take the stand? His Google search history. What does this tell us about his innocence? What does this tell us about his guilt? What really happened to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, Maddie? And the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break in the middle of the crimes? We're going to talk about all of this, but let's next go into the connections with the victims. And then we're going to talk about his calls to his father. Now, after a review, Dateline found that many of the women in the photos that were on Bryan Kohberger's phone, and they didn't see all of them, but they saw a lot of them. A lot of the photos were related to the students who were done away with. They were friends of Maddie. They were friends of Kaylee. They were friends of Xana. So again, we have more connections to the victims. Now, what we do not know, what we have heard but don't know yet, is that Bryan Kohberger had connections of the victims on his cell phone. So we don't know about this yet. As soon as I find out more, I will bring it to you. Now, Steve Goncalves also talked to Ashleigh Banfield about these photos. And when asked if Kaylee was in any of the photos, he said he didn't know, but he found it very telling that there were other students that were their friends, that were in their friend circles, that were on that phone. So more connections from Bryan Kohberger to the victims. So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger's calls to his father. Let me say hello to chat. Come on in. Tell me where you are from. I'm not on camera today. I do apologize, but I was literally working right up until the second that we went live. So Amy's here. She said, wild to think about BK and those animals. Yeah. And Ethan's legs were carved. Right. And we know that. And we're going to talk about what happened to Ethan. I'll give you guys a trigger warning before I go into it. But, for those of you that don't know about Buddy the dog was a dog that was owned by the Colberts. And Buddy the dog was, so not Murphy the dog, that was Kaylee. That was her dog with Jack Decor. This is Buddy the dog. And Buddy the dog was snatched at around 2 a.m. out of his own backyard when he was let out to use the restroom. He was a 12-year-old mini Australian Shepherd. Now, October 21st is significant. It's significant because this is the day that Bryan Kohberger was told by his WSU professor that he was, quote, failing to meet expectations. So I think this would have enraged him. And I think that the fact that he ordered not just a K-bar knife, but then a knife sheath and also a knife sharpener that he would have practiced prior to this. Thank you so much, Enjaz, for modding today. Come on in. Tell me where you're from. Paul's here. Regina's here. Susan's here. Thank you for modding today, Susan. Paul says these new releases of info are something else. Yes, we have so much to dig into. We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's calls to his father, Michael Kohberger, and we're going to go back to that 8.5, 9 hour detour they took on their trip, you guys. Lori's here. Welcome. Susan, thank you for modding. Paul R said, not heard before. Yeah, he did. We're going to talk about that. This is our head mod, Enjaz. And I saw Jennifer is here. Hi, Jennifer. Happy Monday to you as well. Mental Gymnastics is here. Hello, welcome. Las Vegas girl, thank you so much for modding. Come on in. Tell me where you're from. Maxi Doodle is here. Las Vegas Girl said, welcome. Hit the like button on your way in and support the channel. Yes, please do. It helps me out with the algorithm. Marianne says, Jessica, I've been waiting all day for this premiere. You're the best reporter on YouTube as you prevent facts with comparison. Well, thank you so much. A lot of you guys would not have been surprised at some of the information. Hi, Kami, that we learned because I've been reporting out about the WSU colleague and a lot of this information for over a year now. So if you're the type of person who likes to have all of the information so you can make up your own mind about a case, then you are in the right place. Welcome, Maxie Doodle. May says the calls to his father were long. Yes, they were. We're gonna talk about those. We need to have a conversation, and then I want to talk about the WSU student too. But yeah, those calls were very, very long. And thank you to our other mod. This is our other head mod with NJazz, but this is brother Mike and NJazz. And thank you for modding today. Donna and Susan. Hi, Carol. Glad you're here. Okay. Moonlight View is here. All right, let's keep going. And then I'm going to come back in and check in with chat. But come on in. Tell me where you're from. Come on up and talk to me. I apologize for not being on camera, but there is just so much to go through. I want to talk about Bryan Kohberger's calls, these calls to his father. And then we're going to talk about his Google history. We're going to talk about the WSU colleague that BK tended and befriended. And I've been reporting on her for well over a year. Those of you that are part of this channel and have been watching Reporter Room for over a year, we knew about this. And we also knew about the fact that he purchased the knife in the spring of 2022. We knew about this over a year ago on this channel. We were talking about that. We're going to talk about the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break? And we're going to talk about what really happened to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie, and BK's Google history. What does this tell us about his innocence or guilt? So BK called his father, Michael Kohberger, and get this. Okay, so we know that the selfie was at 10:31 a.m. And let me put that up for you guys. Let's see. So this is the selfie I'm talking about. This one with the thumbs up. Ooh, there. Okay, so we know this one. This selfie was taken at 10:31, and we know cell phone data tells us that BK went back to the 1122 King Road home, that he went back to the house at around just a few minutes after 9 a.m. Let me just put him up on the screen here. And let's talk about his father and this road trip. Okay, so I want to talk about Michael Kohberger. So the cell phone records obtained by Dateline NBC also showed that Bryan Kohberger allegedly placed a call. So this was prior to the selfie and prior to returning to the 1122 King Road home to a family account. And Dateline believes it was to Michael Kohberger because he is the owner of this family account. Now, there was 3 different calls. One of them lasted for 36 minutes. And then he made 2 more phone calls, again, to numbers registered to his father, Michael Kohberger's family plan that morning. And the longest call, as Mace just shared, was 54 minutes, so almost an hour. So what were they talking about? Because I don't know about you guys, but these phone calls to Bryan Kohberger's father give me Brian Laundrie, Gabby Petito vibes. Now, if you don't know who Brian Laundrie is, he is the person who did away with Gabby Petito. Now, on the morning after he did away with her, we believe in the evening before, he hiked and he called his parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie, according to Netflix, and they promptly called him an attorney. So I think it's really interesting that Bryan Kohberger has multiple calls to Michael Kohberger beginning at 6:38 a.m. of the morning of these crimes. So just hours after Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana were done away with. And so I think that this is interesting because Michael Kohberger flew out from Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, to meet up with Bryan Kohberger and drive back with him to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Now, law enforcement did tell us that this trip was planned. However, was this trip planned prior to November 13th of 2022? Because if it wasn't, if it was made in the days after, it makes me wonder about this phone call. And it also makes me wonder about that 8.5, 9 hour detour that his father and he took from Pullman, Washington to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Now, there was a snowstorm, but I think most people will agree that a 1 or 2 hour detour to avoid a snowstorm makes sense. But what in the world was going on with this 8.5 to 9 hour detour? It seems excessive. So why did Michael Kohberger and Bryan Kohberger make this huge detour on this road trip? Were they trying to ditch law enforcement, or was something else more nefarious happening? And Michael Kohberger gave multiple reasons as to why they took this detour. Now, maybe he just really didn't know, but that's kind of what I thought until I found out about these three phone calls. And one lasting almost an hour, the other one lasting over a half an hour. I would like to know if these were normal. If Bryan Kohberger habitually called his parents and spoke to them multiple times in a row. But the FBI cell phone expert who examined Bryan Kohberger's cell phone data, which is what Dateline obtained, indicated that later in the mornings, multiple calls were made to a phone number registered to Michael, that's Bryan Kohberger's dad's account. And so now there are other family phones that are registered under this account. So he could have also spoken to his mother, who we know wrote an op-ed against capital punishment. So was this out of the ordinary for him to call multiple times on the same day, that close together? Because we know these calls all took place before he returned to the 1122 King Road home at 9 a.m. Why was there a need for multiple phone calls that morning? And why did he and his father take this 8.5, 9 hour detour on the way back from Pullman, Washington to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania? What did Michael Kohberger really believe this detour was for? I can understand taking a 1 or 2 hour detour for a snowstorm, but not a 8 or 9 hour detour. And we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger told law enforcement when he was arrested. Bryan Kohberger's parents, they were zip tied. Who did this and why? The WSU colleague BK tended and befriended. We know who she is now. Is she going to take the stand? Bryan Kohberger's Google history. What does this tell us about his innocence? What does this tell us about his guilt? What really happened to Xana and Ethan and Kaylee and Maddie? And we're going to talk about the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break in the middle of committing these crimes? So let's talk about Michael Kohberger for just a second, and then we're going to move on. But this trip was planned, but we don't know when this was planned. So if Michael Kohberger and Bryan Kohberger planned this trip for him to fly out to meet Bryan Kohberger and drive back with him after November 13th of 2022, that makes me want to know what the nature of these phone calls really were. And is this why his family is so reluctant to take the stand? Or is it simply they don't want to help the state subject their son to capital punishment? Let me know what you think about all of this. Just watch your words, guys. If you use the M word or the K word, your comment may be filtered out from my being able to read it. Now, the data also showed that BK's phone was in the Moscow area house. It was pinged near the house just after 9 a.m. And then he returned to his apartment in Pullman, where he took this selfie. And I just want to say that it does look like, to me, in my opinion, that there is a wound to his throat. I enhanced the photos, and I just want to show you his thumb. You don't see it really well there. His knuckles look very white, but you can see if you look at the inside of his thumb, you can see these. But when I enhance the photos, you can see there are 2 blisters. You can see them very clearly there on the inside of his thumb. And I, you know, think this is very, very concerning in my opinion. Okay, so let me put this back up. All right, so let's continue on. We have a lot to unpack. I'm not on camera today because I was literally still looking things up, researching, and cross-referencing everything prior to going live. So let's talk about the WSU colleague that Bryan Kohberger spied on, that he tended and befriended. And I've been reporting this out for over a year now. So if you've been with the channel, that was not breaking news. But if you are newer to the channel, maybe you don't know about this. We're going to talk about BK's parents were zip tied, Bryan Kohberger's Google history. What does this tell us about his innocence or guilt? And what really happened to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie? And we're going to talk about that buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break? So let's talk about his friend that he tended and befriended. Let me grab this for you because we know who she is now. Okay, let me add this one in. Okay, so this is his friend. Now we learned that he tended and befriended her, and he reportedly staged a break-in using her key. Now, how would he have had access to her key? Well, we learned that he shared an office with her. She was a WSU colleague. They shared an office. She shared an office with Bryan Kohberger, and she kept the key to her apartment in her office drawer. And she noticed the key was missing. And then she noticed a few hours later, the key mysteriously was returned. And I think at the time she just thought she missed it while she was looking. But he got her key, reportedly, went into her apartment, moved some things around, including putting a cake inside the microwave. And he took letters and a watch and then waited until she got scared and came to him to talk to him about it. Remember, they were colleagues together at WSU and they shared an office. And she went out and bought herself a security system. And he, being the tending and befriending guy that he was, offered to help her install the security system. He got her Wi-Fi password and used her own security system, which included cameras that were installed inside her apartment to spy on her. Now, Steve Goncalves told us that there was a line of women who had filed complaints about Bryan Kohberger. Why there and she did file a police report on this. So, to my knowledge, he still has not been charged. But is she going to be taking the stand? Did law enforcement just feel like it wasn't important to charge on this because they had more important crimes to charge on? We used to think peeping Toms were harmless. We now know that that is not the case. So Steve Goncalves said there was a line of women who had filed complaints about Bryan Kohberger. It is interesting that WSU didn't seem to take any action, because why wasn't he promptly removed from WSU? If they had more than one female coming forward to complain, there should have been an investigation. Instead, they reportedly told these young women to document and witnesses. And while this was all going on, meanwhile, he is driving by the 1122 King Road house. But if WSU had intervened and removed him, would Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana still be here? Or would the crimes have simply happened sooner? Because I believe that he was enraged on October 21st when the faculty told him he was failing to meet expectations. And this is why Buddy the dog disappeared from inside his own yard. Remember, Buddy the dog was found. And BK used to work as a butcher. And that is how Buddy was found. He was found filleted. So let's talk about the photos of the victims, and then we're going to talk about of the victims' friends, and then we're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger, what he said when he was arrested. His parents were zip tied. BK's Google, when law enforcement broke into the house, when they swatted the house, BK's Google history, what does this tell us about his innocence? What does this say about his guilt? What really happened to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie? And we're going to talk about that buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break? So let's go to the connections to the victims. Now, BK's cell phone, I shared with you a few moments ago, contained dozens of pictures of female students at Washington State and the University of Idaho. We also know that BK was following Kaylee and Maddie on Instagram. I showed you guys the shadow dragon information proving that he was following them, and multiple news outlets who had also reported out that he was following them on Instagram. Now, people said that there was no stalking, but in the state of Idaho has a very narrow stalking statute. And this says that the victims of stalking in Idaho, for it to legally be called stalking, means that they had to feel threatened. And in this case, I don't think these victims knew Bryan Kohberger existed. But this doesn't mean that he didn't have connections to the victims. We know he was following them on Instagram. We've heard that there was photographs of the victims on his cell phone. And we learned on Dateline that he had photos of their friends downloaded to his phone. And we've also heard, but do not have confirmed yet, about these victims on his cell phone. And we still don't know about the ID that was found inside a glove, inside a box at BK's Albrightsville, Pennsylvania home. But if this connects back to any young woman in that University of Idaho or WSU, I think this is going to be very difficult for the defense. If it connects back to the victims, it's going to be very difficult for the defense team to overcome. If the animal hairs that were found in BK's Pullman apartment connect back to Buddy the dog or Kaylee and Jack's dog, Murphy the dog, again, that is going to be very hard to overcome. And I shared with you, I was trying to do a FOIA request on Buddy the dog, couldn't get it. So I think, I'm just wondering if that's being held back because it is part of this case. Let me know if you think something is different about that. But if you haven't subscribed, please do, and hit the notification bell. So I think, of course, the most important connection, the most damning connection of all the connections that Bryan Kohberger has to the victims is the knife sheath with his DNA under it, found underneath and to the side of Maddie. We're going to talk about BK's search history, Ted Bundy, and then we're going to talk about what BK told law enforcement when he was arrested. His parents were zip tied. What was really going on with this? What was this? BK's Google history. Does this prove innocence? Does this prove guilt? And what happened to Kaylee, Ethan, Maddie, and Xana? We're going to talk about the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator sit down and take a break? We're going to talk about all of that. Let me just check in with chat and just say hello. I do want to do a poll. If you think that the 9-hour let's do the phone calls. Do you think that the 3 calls that Bryan Kohberger placed beginning at 6:38, the morning of the crimes, is suspicious? Put a 1 in the chat. If you think the 3-hour calls that Bryan Kohberger placed beginning at 6:38 a.m. the morning of the crimes is not suspicious, put a 2 in the chat. I just am really curious where you guys are at on this. Let me check in with chat. I know I'm behind. Thank you for modding today, Pepper. Joel says, good morning from Australia. Pip Lover says, someone did a review of the 911 call for a noise complaint where they spoke to Kaylee. You can see what it looks like. You can see what looks like a Hyundai Elantra in the background and the reflection of the window. And I'm wondering if this is related to what Steve Goncalves told us, which is that he believed Bryan Kohberger was calling in some of those noise complaints to see how long it took for law enforcement to show up. So maybe law enforcement also caught this Pip lover where they saw the white Hyundai Elantra in the background and also did this. Yes, he was, Joe. He worked as a fish fillet man, but he didn't work there very long. But yes, he worked as a butcher. And that's why people who say, oh, well, he's a vegan. Well, his knife sheath was leather. He worked doing fish fillet. He also worked as a butcher, according to his resume. So, clearly he wasn't doing vegan for integrity or ethical reasons. It was related to something else, in my opinion. Brother Mike says, it's not stalking in Idaho. No, it's not. Unless they know they're being harassed. Really, really frustrating. And Mike says, zip tied is the same as handcuffs. It is lighter and they can carry it for tactical raids. The refuge says BK's parents were detained by zip ties by the police, not zip tied by Bryan Kohberger. We're going to talk about that. ASP Lizzie says spiraling around the girl's home over and over for several weeks is stalking, in my opinion, but I understand the law. Yeah, legally, the prosecution cannot charge him with stalking or talk about it stalking because it legally doesn't fit the definition. So we'll say surveilling. I think that's fair. Shady Sadie says, I have a feeling he did that to Buddy. He was stalking in the area. So let's look at our poll. If you think it's suspicious that he called his father 3 times, beginning at 6:38 a.m., put a 1 in the chat. If you don't think it's suspicious that he called his father, put a 2 in the chat. C2 at case 9 says, while Kaylee was talking to the officer, some guys comes out the sliding glass door with zip ties on his wrist. Jesse says, you act like you have no proof that he took the key and there's no pictures of the victims. You act like you have proof that he took the... Well, who do you think took the key? If he's the one that was using her cameras to spy on him, who do you think took the key? How did he get in? And how do you think he got in? If he didn't take the key, he shared an office with her. She said her key disappeared for a few hours. So who took the key if it wasn't him? Malibu put in a 1. Pip Liver put in a 1. Brother Mike put in a 1. Trina says 1. 1 from Shady Sadie. Maxie Doodle put 1. The Jewel said 1. Wandering Opinion says 1. Zusik says 1. Nilda says 1. 1. Wake Up says, yes, Buddy may have been barking at him, snooping around. Yeah, I mean, I think he was out lurking around. All of his phone pings, and if you look at where the Colbert's house was located, and I already covered this in another video, so I'm not going to go through it here. It was on the way to the 1122 King Road home from his apartment in Pullman, Washington. The Bishop says 1. Lisa says 1. Okay, so we have a lot of 1s here. I'm looking for, so if you think it's suspicious that he called his dad, put a 1 in the chat. Wayne says no, he doesn't think it's suspicious. Stacey says 1. So a lot of people think it's suspicious. Some people think it is not suspicious. So a lot of people think this is suspicious. I do think that the public of Idaho who is paying for this trial does deserve to know the truth about this. Welcome. 1. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of 1s. Pepper says 1. Bobby says, I think he sat down to take pics and videos of the crimes. You think that's why the buttocks is in there? 1. Thank you for modding today, and Jazz. Mrs. Magoo put in a 1. Jackie puts a 1. True Crime says 1. Maria says 1. Sherry Wallace says 1. Oh, here's our other head mod. This is 6 cents. Amelia, welcome. Donna put in a 2. AK says 1. Donna says 1. Oh, okay. So Donna, you're changing your vote to a 1. So you do think it's suspicious. 1. So I see a couple of 2s, mostly 1s in the chat. April said, I think his parents live 3 hours away. Dad's free time. His parents lived in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. And BK was calling from the state of Washington. Marianne thinks it's a 1. So if you put a 1 in the chat, and Jess thinks it's a 1. Jules says she believes Steve, and Mike says he had pics so far we know of close friends of the victim. Yeah, that's just what we know so far. 3+ hours. Oh, thanks for that, April. So that's just what we know so far. We don't know everything. Z06 says, can 911 calls be traced to see what phone number they came from? Yes, they can. But these weren't 911 calls to his dad. These were just regular calls. Christian says, so he was handy with a knife. Yes, he was. He worked as a filet man, apparently got fired from that job, didn't last there long, but he worked in a butcher shop, according to his CV. Nilda says, again, Steve Goncalves also say that Bryan Googled the crime at King Road before it was called in. Yes, he did say that. Yes, you're all right. Susan said, I think you're right. Thank you for being here tonight. Jacksonman put in a 1. The Wandering Orphan Room says, reporter room, do you have any speculation on the IDs found, either as a threat to survivors or a link to other unsolved cases? We don't know, but for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, there was an ID found inside a glove, inside a box that is purported to belong to victims at the 1122 King Road house. So how did an ID, so we don't know that this is not confirmed, so speculation alert, but it's been reported out by multiple major news networks that an ID was found inside a glove, inside a box at his parents' Albrightsville, Pennsylvania house. If this is true, in my opinion, this is going to be more important even than the DNA evidence. Afro says it's vegetarian. I believe it's just for food. Yeah, it could just be related to weight loss. And Bree said, yeah, he was a security guard. You're right. He was. And I do want to say thank you so much to Ivy for the $1.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. I will be really appreciate that. That is very kind of you. I'll be putting that toward editing equipment. I do have a new computer. I don't have it set up. It'll be set up by the next live stream, which will be Thursday night. Regina said, thank you so much for the $3 super sticker. That is really kind of you. Thank you so much. And Njaz gifted a reporter room membership. Wow. Thank you so much, Njaz. If you received that reporter room membership, please be sure to thank Njaz. And thank you all of you for your kindness. Trina put in a 1. Sadie Shady says 1. Jewel says 1. Hey, Sylvette. Glad you're here. Just April 1. Okay. So I'm seeing mostly 1s. We saw a couple of 2s, but mostly 1s. Moonlight says 1. So a lot of people feel like this is very suspicious that his dad makes plans to fly out with him. He had 3 phones on his father's family plan. He called 3 phones. Right. So why was he calling that morning? And was this normal? Was this normal? Regina said, in the video, it has a person standing there watching behind their house. The refuge says, I think there should be looking into the roommate. She has not been charged with anything. They were reportedly investigated and cleared. So I'm going to ask people to stop impugning the roommates who have been stuck under a gag order unless we find out some more information that says that in some way they deserve this. But my opinion is that they do not. Okay, so let's continue on because we have a lot of stuff to still get into. So let's talk about Bryan Kohberger's search history, and then we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger said to law enforcement when he was arrested, the zip ties, who really did this and why, Bryan Kohberger's Google history, what does this tell us about his innocence or guilt? We're going to do that right now. And what happened to Ethan, Zanuck, Kaylee, and Maddie? What really happened? And the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break? In just a moment. So let's start with Bryan Kohberger's search history. He allegedly browsed the searches for the University of Idaho murders and a program about serial killer Ted Bundy. Let me pull that up. So this is the paper. Let me move myself out of the way here. That he pulled up. Ted Bundy on the Malignant Being, the analysis of justificatory discourse of an SK. and the beginning of the abstract. So what the paper is about is it theorized the techniques of neutralization, the denial of responsibility, the denial of injury, denial of the victim, condemnation of the condemners, and appeal to higher loyalty play an important role in a youth's decision to commit delinquent acts. The present research project investigates the presence of such techniques of neutralization in the discourse of Ted Bundy and SK using publicly available interviews. Discourse analysis, investigative techniques were used to analyze Ted Bundy's construction of his victims, his actions, and the root cause of his behaviors. The results indicate evidence of justificatory rationalizations of his discourse. So I think this is very, very interesting. So let me just make myself a little smaller. Okay. So let's keep going. So we know that Bryan Kohberger allegedly made a search online for Ted Bundy on August the 16th of 2022, according to investigative records obtained by Dateline. And then he continued to read this research paper about Ted Bundy. We know that he enjoyed watching videos with creepy porn, and it's with a P. He enjoyed watching non-consensual videos. This is what he liked. He liked non-consensual videos that involved being asleep, being passed out, being drugged. So he's a creeper. He also looked, when he was arrested, according to Dateline, he was listening to a version of Britney Spears' song, Criminal. Let's look at that for a second. So here's the lyrics to that song. He's a villain by the devil's law. He's a killer just for fun, fun, fun. That a man's snitch and unpredictable. He's got no conscience. He's got none, none, none. All I know is I should have let go, but no, because he's a bad boy with a tainted heart. And even I know that ain't smart. So this is what he was listening to when he was arrested. And again, by itself, what does it mean? But when the jury is going to be looking at all of this collectively, things are starting to add up. We know he looked up the crime and watched YouTube videos about it. Ashleigh Banfield told us that he watched videos of her reporting on the case. So this isn't surprising. I think he would have wanted to relive this. He would have also been concerned for himself and what law enforcement knew. And in the days after the crimes, there was browsing history on Bryan Kohberger's phone that law enforcement would later collect forensically. And so these included the Ted Bundy, the YouTube videos about the King Road victims. So it does seem like he was very interested in what other people were saying about his crimes, which is even more compelling to me that he probably was behind the Pappa Rogers account, which never posted again on the day that he was arrested, and the Inside Looking, same thing, never posted again. We did have another Pappa Rogers account pop up months and months later, but that was a fraudulent account, somebody just posing to him. So we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger told law enforcement when he was arrested, the zip ties, BK's Google history. What does this tell us? We're going through that right now. What really happened to Anna, Xana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee, and that buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break and sit down in the middle of the crimes? So we also know that BK looked up phrases like sociopathic traits in college students. Can psychopaths behave pro-socially was another Google search that he did. And the quote, University of Idaho M's. So we can see why Ann Taylor did not want to allow the prosecution to be able to use the word sociopath or psychopath. It seems pretty clear, in my opinion, that Bryan Kohberger knew what he was, and that he was trying to find out more about himself. And as some of you have pointed out in the comment section, it would be very easy for someone like Bryan Kohberger, who had a degree in psychology, to fake being autistic, to fake autistic traits for a psychologist to get out of capital punishment. This man has been able to evade accountability his entire life. He harassed young women at the Seven Sirens restaurant, but was still allowed to continue to eat and drink there, even though some of the women he harassed were servers. He harassed female students at WSU, but wasn't removed until after he had done away with Ethan, Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana. He installed security cameras and spied on a female colleague, and she reported it to the police. And we don't know when, but it does. Again, I don't see any consequences for that. And if we've learned anything about peeping Toms, it's that they escalate. He also searched for K-bar knives. Court documents say that the search warrant for Bryan Kohberger's Amazon activity pertaining to knives and the accessories, including the knife sheath and the knife sharpener, that his payment methods and details of the items he added and removed from his cart. In arguing to whether a judge should admit this evidence, the prosecutor said that Bryan Kohberger's Amazon activity showing the purchase of a K-bar knife and sheath in March of 2022. And so we know that the K-bar knife with Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found underneath and to the side of Maddie. And Dateline revealed that after the crime, that Bryan Kohberger went back to Amazon, that he looked at the same K-bar knife. He went as far as clicking buy it now. So was he planning to use another knife? Was he planning to claim he never lost the knife and knife sheath that he had bought earlier? I believe the knife itself was disposed of, but the knife sheath was left behind. Was he planning to go back out hunting and do away with more innocent young people? We don't know what he was thinking for sure, but he did have second thoughts. And instead of buying the second K-bar knife, he closed the window and deleted his Amazon browsing history. We also know that he scrubbed his browsing history using professional equipment at WSU. So I believe he was using that equipment to browse for some of this. I believe that he practiced with the K-bar knife, that he planned this out ahead of time. And a K-bar knife is designed for the use for humans. It's not a hunting knife. It's a military knife designed for human beings. And then the Britney Spears song, again, each one can be explained by itself, but it's cumulative. So let's talk about these cell phone pings, and then we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger told law enforcement when he was arrested, the zip ties, what really happened to Xana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Maddie, and Pappa Rogers, we talked about already. We're going to talk about the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break in the middle of his crimes? So on the night of the crimes, BK's phone got turned off right around 3 a.m. and then come back on again around 4:45. And his phone, he was using a VPN to mask his IP address, but because the VPN on a cell phone doesn't click in right away, when he went to turn his phone back on, that phone pinged on a cell phone tower, placing him driving south and heading back toward his home in Pullman, Washington. So he was on his way from Moscow, Idaho to Pullman. So I'm not sure how the cell phone data could show him anywhere at the times of the crimes, which happened just after 4:04 a.m., since his cell phone was turned off, according to the prosecution. So I'm really unclear as to what Cy Ray is going to actually testify to. In my opinion, it's not going to be very helpful. They might be able to poke some holes and try to create some doubt, but because BK supposedly was going in a different direction when his cell phone was turned off, but we know he meandered all the way back after the crimes from Moscow, Idaho to Pullman, Washington. So it's not unlikely that he would have been meandering to the crimes. After all, he would want it to look like he was just driving around, gazing at the stars on a night with ice, fog, and heavy cloud coverage. In late September, records from Bryan Kohberger's phone included internet search for sociopathic traits in college students. So I think that Bryan Kohberger was trying to figure out who and what he was. And I just want to know if Michael Kohberger knew about Bryan Kohberger and his actions during this phone call on November 13th. Did he talk to his parents and then try to go back to the crime scene a little after 9 a.m. to retrieve his knife sheath, or was he just there to enjoy the awfulness that he created? I want to talk about what happened to Xana, Ethan, and then we're going to talk about what happened to Kaylee and Maddie, what Bryan Kohberger said to law enforcement when he was arrested. BK's parents were zip tied. Who really did this? And we're going to talk about the buttocks imprint. Let's talk about Ethan and Xana. Really interesting. Now, so let's talk about Ethan and Xana. Let me take this one down. I want to grab some pictures of them, because I just feel like the victims are getting forgotten in all of this, and they deserve to be remembered. Okay.
Was allegedly.
So let's talk about Ethan and Xana. Here we go. And then we're going to talk about Maddie and Kaylee. There they are. Okay. Whoop. Just not fast enough. Try one more time. Thanks for your patience with me. I do think it's important to put the victims up on the camera. I don't want just this to be about Bryan Kohberger. Okay, so let's talk about Ethan and Xana and what happened. Law enforcement found Xana in a pool of, I'm going to give you guys a trigger alert here, of blood, and Ethan was found on Xana's bed. So Dateline speculated that Xana had heard something upstairs and went up to investigate. I have a different theory. I know people have different theories about what happened. I think it's related to the DoorDash delivery bag that was found at the kitchen sink. But both Dateline and I will agree on this. We both agree that Xana is the one who called out, "There's someone here." And for those of you that have been with this channel for a long time, you know that I have been theorizing on this that I believed it was Xana who said this for over a year now. I believe that DoorDash delivery bag ended up back on the kitchen sink because she was returning it back to the kitchen. And I believe the perpetrator left the sliding patio doors open to minimize his DNA contact. You will recall that Bryan Kohberger wrote an essay for college on a how-to essay explaining how to minimize DNA transfer and how perpetrators could fool law enforcement by planting DNA evidence. And Fox News has stated that they believe that the blood on the banister may have been planted by Bryan Kohberger himself in an effort to create reasonable doubt. Now, I believe that Bryan Kohberger left the patio doors open because it would have minimized his contact with that patio door. It also would allow him for a fast exit in case he needed to get out. Ethan appears to be the last of the four to be targeted by the perpetrators. So sources close to the investigation believe that BK went up the stairs to the third floor first, and that the target was Maddie. And we're going to talk about Maddie and Xana and what happened to them in just a second. But I do want to give you guys a little bit of a trigger warning on this portion of the video. So the perpetrator also reportedly carved Ethan's lower legs with a blade. And Xana was, according to Dateline, done away with first. And I think that somebody called out, "There's someone here." I think she would have felt the cold whoosh from the door. It was November in Idaho. And I think she was putting her DoorDash on the kitchen counter next to the sink where we have the photos of it. And I think that she called out, "There was someone here." for whatever reason, she went out. Dateline thinks she heard something upstairs. And I don't think these crimes sounded like what's, people have said how could the roommates not call? They had to have heard anything. We have the audio, which I played for you. So I'm not going to play it again in the last live stream that I did. So not the videos that I put out, but the last live stream of the neighbor's camera, where we can hear a thud, we can hear whimpering, we can hear a dog barking, but no one is yelling out and no one is screaming on that. So I do not think that these crimes sounded like what we think they sounded like. So the Dateline also reported wounds to Ethan's arteries. Now, I've heard some people claim it was the femoral artery. So I just thought, well, let's look and see where these are, because I don't think what happened. This is the femoral artery, and it is in the leg, in the groin area. I don't think, being that we found out where the carving took place, it was in his calves. It could have been the femoral artery. It does go down all the way to the leg, but I think it's more likely that this would have been the carotid artery. And let me move myself out of the way for this part. So if you look here, there's both internal and external carotid arteries. And I've shared with you guys in the past that I believe that this is the area that he would have gone for first. So I did do some research on this to say, if one of these arteries was severed, you could silence someone very, very quickly. And remember that K-bar knife had a 7-inch blade, which would easily go all the way through the neck and stick out to the back. That's how long the blade is. It would have stuck out several inches to the back. So I believe it would have, if he had gone for the throat first, so trigger warning on this, I think it would have been very easy for him to silence the victims, but they would have still been alive for a few more minutes. Steve Goncalves said that the victims, that the bleeding went into their lungs and that they drowned. And I think that, that's very possible. I mean, he clearly has connections that we don't have and probably has access to information that we don't have. But you can see that somebody, if he did go after one of the arteries, that it would take a few minutes for them to pass away. It would take a few minutes for that to happen. They would be alive enough to keep fighting back, which is what we know happened. And again, if these crimes sounded like what we think they sounded like, then why don't we have that audio? Why do we have audio of a whimper, audio of a thud? We can clearly hear a dog barking, and I don't know if it's Murphy the dog or a neighbor's dog, but we can clearly hear a dog barking. We can clearly hear a whimper. We can clearly hear the thud, but no one is calling out. No one is yelling. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. So this is the camera, and you could see this was Ashleigh showed this on hers. You can see that where the red dot is, that's the house camera. And then you can see the empty lot facing onto Queens Road on the corner of Kings and Queens Road there. It's an empty lot now of the 1122 King Road house. And then you can see the 1112 home. So I just wanted to share that with you. All right, so let's continue on. We know that Xana fought back and that she lost fingers doing this, reportedly. So I think being that we know that the perpetrator, according to Dateline, hit an artery on Ethan, I think it's very likely that it was the carotid artery, which is, in the neck. One of the carotid arteries, there's internal, external, and that this injury is more likely because Dylan did not report hearing any yells for anyone. Bethany did not report hearing anyone yelling for help or anything to this nature. And we have the audio of the neighbor's camera that also did not pick up any calls for help, any any yells for help, any screaming or anything like that. So again, I just don't think these crimes sounded like what we think they sounded like. So let's talk about Maddie and Kaylee. Let me see. Okay. I want a picture of them, but not one with a knife sheath over their face. Let me just grab them. I just feel like let's put Kaylee up on the screen and then we'll put Maddie up. Okay. We're going to talk about Maddie and Kaylee, and then we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger told law enforcement when he was arrested. The zip ties, we're going to talk about this, and the buttocks imprint. Did the perpetrator take a break? So trigger warning continues, Maddie and Kaylee. So I don't know if we'll ever know exactly what happened, but I believe the knife sheath that was found underneath and to the side of Maddie with BK's DNA, I think he was surprised. We know he was interested, that this was what he enjoyed, what he used to, I don't know, I want to watch my words here. I want to keep it G-rated in case you have little ones in the room, but what he enjoyed watching on his corn with a P, that he enjoyed people being passed out, people being asleep. I think this was something that he fantasized about, and I think his target was Maddie. And the reason I think this is that Murphy the dog was found in Kaylee's bedroom with the door closed. I don't think he ever went into Kaylee's room. It doesn't mean he wasn't planning to go in there, but that's not where he went first. In my opinion, he went to Maddie's room first. So I think Maddie was his intended target. The tan leather sheath, the large that was for this 7-inch K-bar knife, was found in the bed underneath and to the side of Maddie. And Kaylee was in bed at the time, and I believe he either left the knife sheath behind intentionally, but because it was found underneath and to the side of Maddie, makes me think that maybe it got knocked loose. I've heard people say also there was no DNA on this. There was DNA on the inside snap of the knife sheath. I've heard people say the prosecution wasn't going to use the DNA. Yes, they are going to use the DNA. They're not using the IgG DNA that they got out of the trash can. They're using a buccal cheek swab from Bryan Kohberger that they collected after he was arrested, that they had to get a court order for, because if he really wanted to exonerate himself, he could have easily volunteered his DNA like so many other people did in this case. And they were able to match Bryan Kohberger's DNA to the DNA on the snap of the knife sheath, which matched in the octillion. So not million, which is 1, not billion, which is 2, but octillion, which is 8. So Kaylee was with Maddie, and Maddie was on the outside, sleeping closest to the door, and Kaylee was between Maddie and the wall. And according to Kaylee's father, Kaylee sounds like she did fight back. The perpetrator broke her nose, and Steve told us that Kaylee would have passed away from her head trauma alone, that she would have passed away from her head trauma, even if she had survived the stab wounds. I want to get to Maddie next, and I want a picture of Maddie. I was really surprised that there are people that don't seem to know the victims' names. There's Maddie. That's Kaylee, Ethan. There's Maddie and Kaylee. Okay. Maddie is on the left and Kaylee is on the right. And it makes me sad that people don't know the victims' names. And what happens in these cases is these perpetrators become infamous. And I think that's what he wanted. I think he idolized BTK. He idolized Ted Bundy. And in my opinion, he wanted to be like them. And his psychology degree, his bachelor's degree, was about trying to figure out who he was. And his criminology degree, in my opinion, was about him figuring out who he wanted to be. But Maddie was done away with first, and Kaylee sounds like she fought back, and he was absolutely brutal with Kaylee. According to Steve, he broke her nose. She was hit in the face. He punched her in the face So if you are still idealizing this perpetrator and still talking about this, and there are people that do idolize these guys. We saw in the Ted Bundy case, he actually got married while he was on trial for doing away with college sorority girls and a 12-year-old too. But a woman married him. He got love letters, and BTK's daughter has warned against sending these guys love letters. She said, don't do it. If they ever get out, they know where you live. Do you want my dad to show up at your house? So let's talk about the buttocks imprint next, and then we're going to talk about the Hyundai Elantra, and we're going to talk about the zip ties and also what Bryan Kohberger said when he was just arrested. But I do want to, this is interactive. I do want to check in with chat. So please come on in. Tell me where you're from. We are not done. I still have a bunch more stuff to go through, but I just do think it's important to say thank you to our producers and Jazz, Sasha Angel, George Brown Pepper, and Christy Ballantyne. Thank you to our channel members so much if you would like to have your name up here just like this, the channel membership button is next to the join button. It's just a couple of dollars. You get a check mark next to your name, and your name appears just like this in all of my videos and live streams. I update the channel members list in the hours leading up to the next live stream. So every 3 days, 2 or 3 days, I update the channel members list. So thank you so much to our channel members for your support. I really, really appreciate you. If I've left anybody off the list and you are a channel member, please let me know. And thank you for super thanks and coffee gratitude. I really, really appreciate all of you guys from the last live stream. And thank you for your gifted channel membership. Again, if I've left your name off this list, please let me know in the comment section below so I can add you. I'm not perfect and I can make mistakes too. Okay, so let's talk about we talked about this. I want to talk about the buttocks imprint. So, and then we're going to talk about what BK said when he was arrested. So the buttocks imprint, according to Dateline, law enforcement found a chair that had marks of a buttocks on it and suggested that the perpetrator either may have sat down. I don't think, this is just my opinion, let me know if you have a different one. I don't think the perpetrator sat down. I think more likely he was fighting, because we know now that Xana fought back. We know she lost her fingers and that it's more likely that he fell back into the chair for a second and then got back up. Also, the timing of how this happened, in my opinion, I just want to put Xana up there, in my opinion, shows that he, in my opinion, just was fighting really hard. And we know that Dylan heard someone say, and this is Ethan, I just want to show the victims, Maddie and Kaylee and Xana, because they deserve to have their names and faces out there. So I do think that he fought, that he may have, been pushed back into the chair. And this is the patio doors that he came in on. All right. So that's my opinion on the buttocks. Let me know if you have a different thought on how the buttocks got in there. I don't think he would have stopped and had a rest. Do I think he was tired? Yes, but I think that his adrenaline would have been, at 100%. I think it would have been coursing through his veins. I think he would have enjoyed this. I do believe there was an essay gratification. Just because we don't have the evidence for it doesn't mean it didn't happen. He may have had some type of reaction when he did away with Maddie, but it just occurred with underneath the coveralls, and not something that we could see. Do I think he may have had more plans for Maddie? I think it's very, very possible, especially in light of what he enjoyed. The Hyundai Elantra security footage that was obtained by Dateline shows a car that investigators believe is Bryan Kohberger's white Hyundai Elantra circling around and past the house's block 5 times and circles the house 3 times before parking. The cell phone towers and phone records that were obtained by Dateline indicate that the FBI cell phone expert said that Bryan Kohberger's phone connected to a cell tower providing coverage within 100 meters of the 1122 King Road house. Again, these were all after dark. These were mostly after 10 p.m. and between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So for people saying, oh, he liked to go shopping in that area, what stores are open at 10 p.m. at night that he would need to go? What restaurants are open after 10 p.m. at night? What till 4 a.m. that he would have had business to be over there? Now we are learning that that his cell phone connected 23 times over 4 months, and the majority of them, 99% of them, were after dark. One visit occurred just 6 days before the November 13th, 2022 crimes. And I told you guys I believed he was sitting up in that back parking lot behind the 1122 King Road home, and that he was not only just looking in the window, but that he was accessing Kaylee's Bluetooth. Remember, he applied for a job with the Pullman Police Department to attempt to get a job to teach law enforcement how to use technology to solve crimes. So the idea that he would not have been able to hack into her Bluetooth, I don't think I don't think it's a stretch to think that he would have easily been able to do that. It's called blue snarfing. It's not hard at all. And I think that geofencing is going to play a role in this case, because I believe that whether or not he was connecting into Kaylee's Apple phone and laptop, I believe that Steve Goncalves has told us he's never gotten that back. He would have liked to have had it back, because he and his wife Christy sent their daughter Aubrey off to college. That they just recently sent her off to college. They would have liked to have had that for her to have Kaylee's stuff to go to college, but they don't have it back. And I think it's because geofencing is going to play a role. I think his cell phone was, even if he didn't connect into the Bluetooth, was offering him what's called a handshake, which would be saved on the computer server and also on his phone. And you guys have all been in the coffee houses, or maybe you've gone to the hospital, and they always offer, do you want to log in? Do you want to access our Wi-Fi? And whether you choose to say yes or not, the server on the computer that's offering you this from the coffee shop in the hospital will register what's called a handshake. So I think most people, most critical thinkers, which are the people that are watching this channel, no longer are believing that Bryan Kohberger was out stargazing on a night with weather conditions that had ice fog and heavy clouds, because critical thinkers understand that he wouldn't have seen the stars. And the judge has extended Bryan Kohberger's time, not excluded. He extended Bryan Kohberger's time and ability to provide an alibi, which means he has to say where he was and who saw him there. And with knowing that we have 12 hours, people are saying, well, we can't tell it's his car on the video footage that we've seen. Okay, but we haven't seen all of it. We've seen little pieces of it. Law enforcement turned over to the defense team 12 hours of raw video footage. And Ann Taylor, it has to be bad for Bryan Kohberger. If it exonerated him, she would have wanted the jury to see it. But instead, Ann Taylor, BK's defense attorney, filed a motion to exclude, to suppress the 12 hours of raw video footage of the Hyundai Elantra. And I believe it's because there is proof that it is Bryan Kohberger's car. So we talked about the neighbor's camera, and we talked about what it heard. It heard a loud thud. It heard a dog barking. It heard a whimpering. I'm not going to play it again. I already played it on the last live stream. But there is no audio of anyone calling for help. There is no audio of anyone yelling or screaming. So again, I just want to share with you that I think, and I submit this for your consideration, that these crimes did not sound like what people think they sounded like. And I think it's because he began with the throat, and that somebody could have remained alive for a couple of minutes. So I did look up, like, how long would somebody survive? And If you severed major arteries like a carotid, they could still have been alert and awake. They may have not been able to say anything because it was the throat area, or make any type of calls for help or cry out. But that if the severing of major arteries like the carotid artery in the throat, that this can lead to rapid blood loss, and that somebody would not pass away for a couple of minutes, potentially under a minute, if multiple arteries are severed, because the carotid, external and internal, there are two of each, and they run up both sides of your neck. So this would have resulted in a rapid passing away, but not instantaneous. So this explains how they were able to fight back, and maybe also why we don't have any audio of any of the victims calling for help. And even Ethan and Xana, who were downstairs, never called 911. So let's talk about the zip ties next, and then we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger said to law enforcement. Let me check in with chat. I do want to make this interactive. Let me see. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I do apologize I'm not on camera. I was literally editing right up until I went live. And I put another video out today as well. So let me see. Sylvette says, Wayne wants to know, how far can you ping on a cell tower? 100 meters. 100 meters. Sylvette said, I think he did not the other girls because he knew Dylan had seen him and probably called the police. I think you're right. I think that, in my opinion, too, he heard someone call out, there's someone here. And I think he did come barreling down the stairs from Maddie's room. I think he came barreling down the stairs and chased Xana back into the bedroom. I think if Xana had not come out of her room with that DoorDash bag, or come out of her room because she heard something, if she'd stayed in her room, she would have survived, and Ethan would have survived. I think he came barreling down those stairs, and Ethan was reportedly still in the bed. I haven't heard anything different, but he was still in the bed when he was done away with. So he was either asleep or passed out, and Xana went back into her room, and he chased her back into the room, which is why I don't know if Ethan tried to sit up or what happened. And Jazz says the door lock was allegedly broken. Ashley says the sliding door didn't lock. That's what I've heard. Even if it did, you know how easy it is. Yeah, a slider can be so easily popped open by lifting up and out. And the best way to protect yourself, if you have a sliding glass door and you just need an inexpensive, secure way to protect yourself, is to get a broom handle and measure, or a piece of wood, the length of the track of your sliding glass door, and put that in there. Then nobody could just pop that and enter the house. Christian says Kohberger's father was the getaway driver. Oh, wow. Avocado Toast said, I think he knew what his son did. A lot of people are wondering. I think a lot of us thought that until we heard about these 3 phone calls. And again, this could just be, innocent. Maybe he always called his family 3 times in the morning. Maybe that was typical. I don't know. But if it wasn't typical and it was unusual, and if I were a victim's loved one, I would want to know the answer to this. So I sincerely hope that the prosecution addresses this, or that if it's not addressed during the trial, that the victims' families are able to answer any of the questions. But this is one of the questions I would want to know is, when was that road trip with Bryan Kohberger and his father planned? Was it planned prior to November 13th? If it was, okay, no red flags. Did Bryan Kohberger always call his father at 6:30 in the morning, his family members, because it was his father's family plan? But Dateline said his father, Michael Kohberger. Did he always call his dad multiple times? Was it typical for him to talk for a 50-something minute phone call, and then a 30-something minute phone call, and then the other one, I guess, was shorter than that? But how much do you really have to say on these phone calls? What was was this typical of their phone history. And if it wasn't, and on that day was longer than usual and more calls, repeated calls, more often than usual. And then we know he went back to the house after those phone calls at a little after 9 a.m. to the 1122 King Road home, and then came back and took his thumbs up selfie. If it was not typical, if I were a victim's family member, I would want to know about what Michael Kohberger knew. Ann Taylor has told us that his family doesn't want to cooperate. Why? Maybe it's just because they don't want to have their son face any consequences. And I just feel like there had to be signs. Both of his sisters have mental health degrees, and he was removed. Bryan Kohberger was removed from his high school, not expelled, not suspended, not detention, not expelled for a few days. He was removed completely and had to complete out of his high school program, completely removed, and had to take a different high school program online. And so I think there were red flags, in my opinion. Let me know if you have a different feeling about it, but it seems like there were red flags. And I'm just wondering if the family was in denial about this. Was there some denial on the parents' part? And, were there red flags also for WSU? I'm not blaming the college, but boy, if you have female students coming in and telling you that a male teaching assistant is blocking their exit and forcing them to have to go around him and following them out to their cars, and that they're feeling harassed and grading them differently. He could have been removed, and then they did their investigation. They didn't have to fire him, but they could have removed him from the program, or at least removed him from his teaching assistant position and pending an investigation. Instead, they told these young women they had to document it. When his coworker had her key taken out of her office that she shared with Bryan Kohberger, this woman that he tended and befriended, this WSU colleague, only to find out to have the key returned to her apartment and then have things moved around. And then she still doesn't suspect him, even though I think he would have easily been the one that had access. Common sense tells me that she shared an office with him. He would have known where she kept her keys. And the fact that he installed security cameras and used them to spy on her is egregious. Again, where's the accountability? I just think there were so many red flags. And, I don't know what his parents knew and when they knew it, but it just seems like there were opportunities for interventions along the way and that none were taken. And it just makes me wonder if we had earlier interventions with would Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana still be here? Dylan is a witness. She is a survivor. And this is my opinion. I think had Dylan or Bethany come out of their rooms, they would no longer be here. We would have an Idaho 5 or an Idaho 6. I think they survived because Dylan did peek out of her door, but this was after Xana called out, "There's someone here," when she saw a man with bushy eyebrows, dressed all in black, carrying something that she thought looked like a vacuum cleaner, but I think it was the K-bar knife, as it does look like the end that you use to go along your baseboards with a vacuum cleaner in the dark. To me, they look very similar. It could have easily been misidentified by her. She said he was 5'10", I believe, or taller, because said she was 5'10". He's 6 feet tall. She said he was white. He's white. She said he was athletic but not muscular. I think that describes his physique. And she described his eyebrows as bushy. I think those eyebrows are bushy. So that was Dylan's role. She survived. And whatever you want to say about the roommates, they did the right thing because they're alive. If they had come out of their room like Xana did, they wouldn't still be here. So I think I am urging caution when it comes to the roommates. I am asking you guys, they have never, ever gotten to speak for themselves to the public. They have had words attributed to them by law enforcement, but they themselves have never had a chance to speak. So I am just urging everybody to please let them speak for themselves before you pass judgment on Dylan and Bethany, before you suddenly say that you're not suspicious of this guy whose DNA was found on the inside snap of the K-bar knife. You're not, and whose white Hyundai Elantra without a license plate on the front of it was seen driving around in 12 hours of raw footage, who enjoyed watching videos of women who were passed out and drugged and non-consensual SA acts, that's what he enjoyed before that's all given a free pass. But Dylan and Bethany, whose only crime is that they're alive, they were interrogated by law enforcement. Dylan went through 5 interviews with law enforcement. So I'm just like begging people to please stop attacking Dylan and Bethany. I've been begging this for over a year now. Give them some grace. Let's let them. They have never broken the gag order. They have never sold their story. They have never snuck comments out to anybody. They have protected the prosecution's case. And in my opinion, it's because they care. They care about Kaylee. They care about Maddie. They care about Xana, because these were their friends. These were their friends. This is the guy who has his DNA found on the knife sheath, that was found underneath and to the side of Maddie. This guy had pictures of WSU and Idaho students and friends at the Idaho State of Kaylee and Maddie on his phone, that reportedly also had pictures of Kaylee, Maddie, and Xana on his phone. I want to welcome Angela, who's a brand new Reporter Room membership. Welcome so much to the Reporter Room family. Thank you so much to Donna Bravo for the $1.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that and appreciate you. Thank you, NJazz, for gifting another Reporter Room membership. This is so nice of you. Thank you, Pepper, for gifting a Reporter Room membership. If you guys got these memberships from NJazz gifted one earlier, please say thank you to NJazz. If you got a Reporter Room membership from Pepper, please say thank you to Pepper. Thank you, Pepper, for the $2 super sticker. I'm putting that toward editing equipment. And I hope to be streaming live from a new computer on Wednesday. I hope to have it set up by Wednesday. And thank you, Jenna, for becoming a Reporter Room channel member. Thank you so much. And welcome to the Reporter Room family. Okay, I'm going to take a couple more comments, and then we're going to talk about the zip ties. And we're going to talk about what Bryan Kohberger said when he got arrested. Oh, and thank you, 6 Cents Amelia, for gifting a Reporter Room membership. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. So let's go into the next part. All right. Let's talk about the zip ties. Okay, so when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, we know law enforcement had him on their rifle scopes, looking at him while he was in the kitchen. And reportedly, he was standing in his kitchen wearing a hoodie and gloves. And my understanding is these were medical grade gloves. And a lot of people have said, well, he has OCD. Okay. And I guess my question is, if he has OCD and he likes to wear gloves, then thank you, NJazz. then why isn't he wearing gloves in the traffic stop with his dad? Where are the gloves? I don't see gloves on him. Where's the gloves on him on the WSU traffic stop where he talked himself out of a ticket with a female officer? Where were the gloves before the crimes? Why do we only have these gloves after the crimes were committed? So my understanding is he had medical grade gloves and he was separating out his trash from his parents' trash. And law enforcement said he was taking his trash and putting them into separate plastic baggies. And they reportedly saw him walking down to neighbors' trash cans and placing his personal trash into his neighbor's trash and his parents' trash into their trash cans. So according to Dateline, he was wearing a hoodie and gloves, and they were medical grade gloves is what I believe. And he was separating out his parents' trash from the trash can. Now, according to what the police reported out, they said that they arrested him in the bedroom, and I believe he went running to the bedroom. So Ashleigh Banfield said at the very end of her video that she put up that Howard Blum told her that BK's parents were zip tied, and many people have wondered if BK zip tied his own parents. So let me take this down for a second and grab this instead. Oop. I don't think that's the case, and this is why. Okay. And my sourcing here is ABC7 Eyewitness News, and it says this is detailed. So this is an article from November 18th of 2024, because I wanted to know about the zip ties too. Did he zip tie his parents? Like, was there something else going on here? Like, what was the zip? Because I got asked about it in the comment section. And I also was just concerned because Howard Blum has said a couple of things and attributed things back that he's later walked back. Like he said, the motive was that Bryan Kohberger wanted to impress Dr. Ann Ramsland, and that she was writing a book and had been in contact, and just attributed some things, and she had to come out and defend herself. He also attributed some things that Steve Goncalves said, and Steve had to come out and say, no, I didn't say those things. So I just, had a red flag when Ashleigh said that the source was Howard Blum. I'm sorry, Howard, if you're watching, it's not personal, but we have had two instances, and I know stuff, happens, but he, nobody's right 100% of the time. But I just wanted to find out, okay, well, what did happen? And so when I was looking through at articles, it said here that this was Ann Taylor's lawyers claimed that during the raid, she said that law enforcement broke the front door of the Albrightsville, Pennsylvania home, shattered the sliding glass door of the basement, and held the entire family at gunpoint. I'm sure they did. I mean, this guy allegedly did away with 4 innocent people, and he did have a Glock that was retrieved, according to the affidavit. They also allege that while BK was zip tied at his hands and surrounded by police at gunpoint, he made statements to the arresting officers despite not having his rights read to him. Of course, Ann Taylor wanted those statements thrown out, but they're coming in. And I'm going to tell you some of what he said. So she wanted the statements thrown out along with other key pieces of evidence. And yes, there is evidence that she claimed they were illegally gathered by law enforcement using his IGG information. The judge said, no, they weren't. It was not illegal what they did. And law enforcement linked Bryan Kohberger to the crime when they found the DNA that was a statistical match to the knife sheath found underneath and to the side of Maddie. So I think the fact that Bryan Kohberger was put in zip ties, to me, says that his parents were probably also put in zip ties, not by Bryan Kohberger, because they zip tied his hands and surrounded by, but probably his parents, because they maybe wondered too what his parents knew and when. So I just thought that would definitely be worth pointing out what happened there. And now let's talk about what Bryan Kohberger said to law enforcement. So I told you a little bit about what he said, but he also asked a police officer about his education and then suggested that they get coffee at a later date. Now, I think that Ann Taylor has tried to suppress the search, BK's body search that was done by law enforcement. And I think it's because there are scars and marks on him. I showed you the blisters on the thumbs up selfie, which let me put that up. Of the thumbs up selfie of his thumb. But I think also that there were marks on, we can't see it because he's buttoned all the way up in this selfie. Whoop, let me see. His shirt's buttoned all the way to the top. But I think there were also marks on his wrist and on the law enforcement stop. And let me just show you that. Yeah, right there. Let me just went by it. Just going to the law enforcement stop. I just want to show you his wrists. Oh, I didn't get close in on it. His wrist, on the right wrist, looks like it has a large scar, a large mark. And I think this is why those body cam footage was collected. I think this is why there were two stop. There it is right there. You can see on his wrist on the right, you can see a mark. It looks like it's 2, 3, maybe even longer going down into his sleeve. If you watch the body cam footage back, you can see that he clearly is adjusting his sleeves when law enforcement is leaning in. And I believe law enforcement was trying to get on body cam if there was any marks or scars on his hands and wrists while he was driving with his father from Pullman, Washington to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Remember, there were two stops. They were around 11 minutes apart, both for tailgating. And Malibu, I agree with you. The two stops were not a coincidence. I agree. And I think that this scar on his wrist is probably the reason why they stopped him twice. They wanted to get a close-up of that, which is why the law enforcement officer leaned in and got a nice good close-up of that wrist. And Ann Taylor, we know there was something in the body cam footage searches. So I believe that the blisters that were on the thumb, which I showed you on this video, and I enhanced the traffic, but these are clearly blisters. And I think these would have healed up, but I don't think that this would have healed up. This wrist, I don't think would have healed up that fast. I think it would have taken longer for the wrist on that to heal up. So that's my opinion. Let me know if you have a different one. I want to welcome Trina Clark as a channel member. Welcome. And also welcome Brandy H as a brand new channel member. Welcome to Reporter Room. Thank you so much for being channel members. Well, guys, let me check in with chat. Come on up and talk to me. Tell me what you guys think about all of this information. Now that we've, a lot of this wasn't a surprise to our channel here on Reporter Room, because a lot of this I've been talking about for over a year. If you go back and watch my live streams that I did in February, March, and April of 2024, you will see I covered a lot of this, including the WSU colleague, and a lot of this information was not a shock to people who have been longtime watchers of Reporter Room. In fact, I would say that 90% of what Dateline shared, we have already talked about on this channel. But what was a surprise is that, it was just some of the additional stuff that we did take in. And we were also able to get confirmation from NBC. Now, I've heard people saying that the NBC doctored photos, the one of him in the hoodie, that it wasn't really him, that it was doctored. And all I have to say is, come on now, y'all. Yeah, this is Ashleigh. Thank you so much, Ashleigh. Ashleigh's for those who think others are involved, they haven't been named or caught. Why? BK was willing to go down for others. Okay. And so thank you so much. I agree. And for people who are still impugning the roommates, after all this time. It breaks my heart because they've never broken the gag order. And if they really did it, they, to me, they would have said something by now. Something would have come out. I just, they've never broken the gag order. They've never defied the judge's law. And I think this gag order, which was put in place at the request of Bryan Kohberger and his defense team, is absolutely horrible. It's horrible because it left this gap of information where anything could be attributed to innocent people like the DoorDash driver and innocent people like Dylan and Bethany, who, in my opinion, their only crime is that they survived this attack. And had Dylan, I think the frozen shock face, people said, oh, but you aren't frozen in shock face for 8 hours. Listen, she told law enforcement she was drunk. I believe they said, why didn't he see you? Why didn't he see you when you froze for a second? Why didn't he see you? And I think she said, I froze. I was frozen in shock face. She wasn't saying forever because she tells us she closed the door and locked it. And we know she was, texting with Bethany. So she was freaked out. And for people who said, well, nobody would have passed away if they would have called 911 sooner. Steve Goncalves is saying that Kaylee would have passed away from her head injuries. And that's, but the way that the knife, if he was going for the carotid artery, and we know from Ethan that he did, they would have passed away in minutes. There's nothing that was going to save them. And again, I just don't think these crimes sounded like what we think they sounded like. It's awful. It's too bad that, everybody had been drinking that night. They were, and the three, Xana was only 20, so she was underage drinking. And Dylan and Bethany, Dylan was the youngest. She was only 19. Bethany, I think, was 20. So the age of consent of drinking is 21 in the United States. So I think they were all out drinking. And I just don't think this crime sounded like what we think it sounded like because of the audio that we heard. The audio from that house where we can hear a dog clearly barking. We can hear whimpering sounds, but it didn't pick up yelling or shouting or screaming. I don't think so. I don't think it picked those up because it didn't happen that way. I think a 7H blade, if you go for the throat first, and knowing now that Ethan, we didn't know this, that it was an artery, and I suspect it was a carotid artery. But knowing now that it was, let me take this down. A carotid artery, to me, I don't think it sounded like what we think it sounded like, you guys. I want to thank Shannon for the $5 super chat. Thank you so much. She says that his ring finger looks like a Band-Aid, not a small ring, and she gives the channel a thumbs up. Thank you so much. Let's look at that. Let's look at the ring finger. Let me add this back in. Okay, let's look at that. So she thinks that the ring finger on the hand looks like a Band-Aid. Let me move myself out of the way. Let's look at that together. Tell me what you guys think if you see a Band-Aid on the ring finger. I do see swelling on the ring finger. I do see what you're talking about. It looks like there's in the pixelated images, it does look like there is a, defined square there. I don't know if it's a Band-Aid. It could be also a piece of tape. Maybe. I'm not sure. But it could be a Band-Aid. It could be. Let me know what you guys see. Let's look at it carefully because I put it under a bunch of different filters. I do see what you're talking about when I have it under the X-ray filter. I can see definitely where you're talking about on the ring finger that there is more of a square there. Some people think that, he may have had some kind of an injury to the ring finger. And then I definitely see 2 blisters on his thumbs. Maybe even 3, but definitely 2 blisters on that thumb. And I suspect that was from holding something. I mean, that to me looks like a blister. It doesn't look like they popped, but it looks like multiple blisters on that thumb. Let me check in with Pepper's loving my reporter room fam and mods are us. Thank you for modding today, Pepper, and thank you for the $2 super sticker. Thank you so much. Yes, mods are us. Thank you to all of the people, all of our awesome mods. You guys are awesome. Betsy says, just look at the collar line. I say a bruise possibly. Okay, let's look at that. I did enhance that, and he does have his shirt buttoned up. So let's look at it. I did enhance that because I thought there might be something there too. Some people thought there was a bruise on his cheek. And there's the mark on the neck. So I agree. I think there may be something there. What we didn't have on this is the traffic stop body cam when his father was driving from Pullman back to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. And on that, I clearly see what looks to me a 2 or 3, maybe even 4-inch scar on his right wrist. And when you watch the body cam footage of that traffic stop, you see him adjusting. You can see him adjusting his shirt. And in my opinion, he was trying to hide that. Let me know if you feel differently. ASP Lizzie says, Z06, he's so creepy and goofy at the same time. Bree says, Christina, she also works in psychology. I believe both sisters. His sisters are both in the mental health field. So do you think it's, let me see. Thank you so much to NJAS for NJAS is one of our head mods. Thank you for all of our mods. Brother Mike is one of our head mods, and Six Cents Amelia. Here's Brother Mike. Doesn't have his collar fixed. It is weird that he's like buttoned up all the way in this selfie picture. Like, why is his shirt buttoned all the way up? We know he didn't go to work that day. He took the day off of work, right? He took the day off work. So why is he buttoned all the way up to take this selfie picture with the thumbs up? And if once you know where to look for the blisters, you can almost see them without me enhancing the photos. Let me see. Albie said, yes, those were the traffic stops, were not a coincidence. I agree. This is what I've heard. It's a speculation warning. What I've been told is that the traffic stops were because they wanted to get body cam footage of him. They had identified him as a suspect on December 19th. They lost him. This is what I heard. Again, speculation alert. I heard they were tailing him and his father, and that they lost him when they did that 8.5, 9-hour detour, and that they refound him again. And that's when they did the 2 traffic stops. And then the first one, I heard they didn't get the body cam footage that they were trying to get of his hands, wrists, and face. And on the second one, they were able to get better body cam footage. Now the FBI is denying this. So, but multiple sources have said this is what happened. Urban says, why didn't he dress that way? After the crimes, wasn't he going to show up for school? He took the day off from school that day. Disappointed you are in the right place. Pip Lover says, the shirt isn't buttoned up fully in this picture either. Well, this one it is. It's all the way to the top. It looks like that top button does look like it's done up, or at least closed. Yeah, we have a Facebook group on Reporter Room. If you want to come and talk about this and other things, you can join us. Just type in Reporter Room and Idaho, and it should pop up for you. And then NJAS has the link here in the top chat. Sit it to it. Case 9 says he did heal by then. Not a scar. Not a scar. I think it depends how deep the wounds were. If you've ever had like something heal, I still have a scar from where I cut my ankle when I was 9 years old. I still have a scar from it. It was a deep cut, and it was probably like a 3-inch cut, and I still have a 2-inch scar to this day, even as an adult. Yeah, brother Mike says, go middle of nowhere. When law enforcement asked him and his father where they were going, they told law enforcement they were going for Thai food. Thai food. And his dad says they're going to Pennsylvania. But I do wonder, like, what did his dad know? When did he know it? And what did his dad think that 9-hour detour was for? What did his dad think that was for? Cyborg Mama says during the stop, he never even used his hand with the scar on it to take his license from his officer. He reached over with his left hand, totally awkward. Oh my gosh. Wow. I have the traffic stop in my playlist on this channel. You're welcome to go back and watch traffic stop. That you can put it. Did you guys know you can slow-mo things? If you go to the gear button on your YouTube, you can slow or speed up a video. It'll say like 1.5 or 0.75. It'll say normal. Normal's the normal speed. And if you put it to 1.75 or 1.50, it'll slow down to that. If you put it to 1.25 or 1.5, it'll speed it up. Disappointed said, I found it very strange on law enforcement stopped the way that he handled his driver's license. Yeah, I think that is, he did look like he has a cut. It definitely looks like there's a scar there, or there was a very deep cut that wasn't all the way healed. We know there was something. We know there was something on the body cam because Ann Taylor filed a motion to suppress. Suppress means she does not want the jury to see it. On the body search that was done on him when he was arrested, she wanted that body search to be excluded from the trial. She lost that motion. It is coming in, so we will get to find out during the trial. And Malibu said maybe to see if his father was not in danger. That could be. Sherry said, I agree. Jessica, Ann Taylor wanted the search suppressed because there was something damning evidence of the physical altercation. I agree. There's something she doesn't want the jury to see. And again, each thing individually can be explained away, but it's going to be a preponderance of the evidence, right? Yeah, I agree. It's weird to be all buttoned up, but not going anywhere. And she's talking about this photo where he's all buttoned up to give this big thumbs up, but we know he took the day off from work. He went down to Clarkston, right? And where the Nez Perce Reservation is. And yes, the victims did. They did. We know Xana did. I don't know about Ethan because he was still found in bed, but Xana was up and she did fight back. We know this because she reportedly lost some of her fingers, you guys. Jackie said, I saw the scar, but didn't realize he was tugging his sleeve down. Great catch. Thank you. That's what happens when you watch, or when you're editing, you see things for a really long time. Tori said he's toast. Disappointed said, yes, he tried to hide that when he handed over the driver's license. Can I play that? I don't know if I can find it right now. I have it on the playlist. You guys can watch it. I don't have that prepared. If I would have known you were going to ask me, I would have, and I would play it for you. But it's a really long stop. Bree said, definitely not. The FBI denies involvement, but they were already heading in the right direction. Yeah, and they knew he was a suspect. GR says, believe he was right-handed. I've seen the video of him signaling with the right hand. Betsy said, but only the FBI knew of Bryan Kohberger by December 12th and the police a week later. My understanding is I just only know that law enforcement knew about Bryan Kohberger on the 19th. I've never heard that the FBI knew about him earlier. It doesn't mean that I'm right. I could be wrong. I am not a soothsayer, and I definitely, learn from you guys. Susan says we've all visited the like button today. Thank you so much, Susan. Really appreciate that. And thank you for modding. Kelly said, I was there the day in Pennsylvania court. His hands were red. Tracy said, I'm surprised he wasn't diagnosed with autism sooner since his mother is a special ed teacher. She should know the signs. Right. So and if being that he has a degree in psychology, how hard would it be to fake symptoms? I agree. They fought back. We know Kaylee did, and we know Xana did. I don't know if Ethan did. He may have just been literally in bed sleep. He could have been passed out. Jana says, I accidentally hit the thumbs down. My dog jumped on my lap. Oh no, you can still give it a thumbs up. You can change your choice. Mike says, did kind of, or defense room putting hands. Robert said, I noticed his hands immediately when I was looking at it. Zerper thinks that his knuckles look a bit swollen. Let's look at those. They look very pronounced. I don't know if they're swollen or not. Could be. But definitely injuries to that thumb, which to me, he was holding something in that hand. Some people have said, well, if he's right-handed, we don't know if this picture was taken in the mirror, if he had the mirror thing checked on his phone. If you've seen some of my videos, you see the reporter room hat name lettering is backwards when I'm wearing my reporter room hat. And that's because if I don't click a box that tells it not to mirror, it will mirror it. And sometimes I forget to check that box. Disappointed said he reached all the way across his father with his left hand to the officer with his license. Okay, now I am really intrigued. All right, should we pull it up? Let me see. Let's look. Let me pull it up. Now I'm really intrigued. Let's look at it. Okay, I'm pulling it up. All right. Okay, let me take this down. Add this one in. Okay, so here we are. My source on this is Law and Crime. Let's watch it. Let's watch it.
Hello. How you doing? How y'all doing today? Good, good. Take a look at your driver's license real quick if I could. See, he's right up on that van, man. He was right up on the back end of that van. Pulled you over for tailgating. Is this your car? Okay. Cool. Where are you headed?
Well,
Thai food.
Coming from WSU. And,
okay, let's look at that because you guys wanted to see. So we're going to slow it down. Let's slow down the thing. Let me turn the volume down because I know it's loud. Let's pull back and let's look and see. Does he adjust his sleeve? What happens here?
well,
Cool. See, he's right up on that van, man. Good, good. Take a look at your driver's license real quick if I could. See, he's right up on that van, man. He was right up on the back end of that van.
So
Pulled you over for tailgating. Is this your car? Okay.
So he does hand it over with his right hand.
Cool. Where are you headed?
But he does lie and say they're going for Thai food.
well, we come from.
So we're okay. I'm having a hard time hearing you because of the traffic. So you're coming from Washington State University, and you're going where? Oh,
We're going to be going to Pennsylvania.
oh, okay.
So why would Bryan Kohberger lie and say they're going for Thai food? And again, you can see he's making good eye contact with the police officer here too. I don't see an inability to make eye contact. And those eyebrows look bushy to me, guys.
For hours.
Hours, days.
Hours to drive. Well, almost a day.
Okay. And what did you say about some SWAT team thing? Or
Yeah, there was a mass shooting and everything. We don't know.
Where?
This was
Interesting.
well, it's horrifying because he told the universe, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So
He does have his arms both down. He's got one between his legs and the other one's like pulled back, tucked in, out of sight.
y'all work at the university there?
I actually do work there.
Oh,
Do it. His PhD in criminal
okay.
justice.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that incident. Just yesterday, or?
No, this happened this morning.
I don't see any difficulty with Bryan Kohberger making eye contact, and I thought that was one of the hallmarks of people who are autistic. I thought it was difficulty making eye contact, and if you look at those eyebrows from what the angle that that Dylan would have seen, to me they do look bushy. You can see almost on the left eyebrow it comes out just a little bit even beyond, like against his skin. You could see why she would have described those as bushy, in my opinion. I think they'll be nicely trimmed for the trial, but look at the eyebrows, you guys.
Still wrapping it up for investigating. I will not shoot his two shoes because they did shoot somebody,
Let's see.
and then you can get.
Yeah, the eyebrows like stick out a little bit. I can see why she described those as bushy. His hands are tucked down. Other than handing the law enforcement his driver's license with his left hand, it does look like they're tucked away.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So do me a favor, don't follow too close, okay? All right. Thank you.
And again, he reaches with his left hand, not his right hand. So that is interesting, you guys. Very, very interesting. So thank you for asking me to look at that. I wasn't going to, but yeah, we might as well. Brother Mike said, I'm sure he wants his dad talking about it. Yeah. ASCP people can't keep it inside. His dad gave it away. Yeah. Yeah, the officer's fluffy conversation stalling. I think he was like all the way in with that body camera, and they stopped twice. They were stopped twice within 11 minutes, and I think it was an effort to try to get body cam footage of him. And those eyebrows are bushy. Yeah, I don't think he doesn't look autistic to me. Malibu thinks they're bushy for sure. Susan said his dad doesn't know. He's proud of his son. How crushing is it? What a great disappointment he is. Stacy said, I hope they have more than this. Selfies and stargazing is troublesome. Oh, well, I'm sure they do. We haven't seen the evidence. All we know about is stuff Ann Taylor's tried to suppress. We haven't seen the 12 hours of raw video footage of the Hyundai Elantra. X says, what are they saying? It's hard to make out what they're saying. This boy said, I think he noticed it while he was handed it back to him. And when they went to take it back from him, he reaches in with his left hand to take it back. Right. Debbie said, why talk about the shooting? And Barbara says, I believe he's hiding his hands. ASAP Lizzie, sorry, his brows would be bushy even if they were shaved off. Nilda says BK makes much more direct eye contact than Michael. Okay. Sherry says narcissists often say off the wall things to avoid answering questions. Malibu thinks it is a false stop. ASAP says he has a prominent brow. And ZO6 said BK probably knows how to speak to cops and not divulge things to make them suspicious. And Regina said there are a lot of men who have bushy eyebrows. That's true. And were all of those men, did they have their DNA found on the knife sheath underneath and to the side of Maddie? I don't think so. Office mate. Again, each piece of evidence you might be able to explain away, but this is going to be a circumstantial case, which is going to be the preponderance of the evidence. The preponderance of the evidence. And the fact that the knife sheath was found underneath and to the side of Maddie Bogan, to me, says a lot. Well, guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. If you haven't subscribed to Reporter Room, please do. Please consider sharing this on your socials. And thank you so much for coming by to spend a little bit of time with me. And I look forward to seeing you on the next live stream, which will be on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be scheduling that in just a few minutes. Please subscribe. It's free and it helps me out so much.